Birdhouses are probably one of the easiest things that people get into and it's probably one of the first things a lot of people make out of a gourd is a birdhouse. That's what they think about. They're very durable. The shell does not need to be anything except cleaned off the shell, the skin off the outside of it. Just like this is. You don't need to sand it. I have painted them, I've dyed them, I've wood burned them, I've done almost everything on one of these things, and nothing holds up. No varnish, no epoxy resin, nothing will hold up outside all summer, except chip carving. You can chip carve them. If you burn them and gouge them really deep, the lines will stay, but eventually, just like everything else, it fades. And you are left with the pattern on it, and that's it. Cavity-dwelling birds in the United States, there are 74 species of cavity dwellers. Then these birds do not live in here. They just have their nest in here, but they want their hole on their birdhouses above halfway. So if you look at the body of the gourd, think anything above the halfway point. If it's too far down here, the babies will fall out when they're too little, and the birds will not use it. They will come in here, you'll see them perch on that and look inside to see how far the bottom of this is. And they're going to fill up the bottom of this with sticks first. The males will start putting sticks in the bottom of this for the drainage, and then start collecting animal hair and down and whatever else they can find to make the nest out of. And then at the right time, then the females will come in and they'll they'll inspection. Yeah, that's a pretty good house. Okay, I think we'll hang out with you this year. And then they'll make their babies in here. Now some of them will go, with some of the wrens I've had, we've had 2 nestings in the season. They'll get their first thing in the spring. I hang my birdhouses out at the first melt. As soon as we get our first big melt in the spring, I hang my birdhouses out because the birds are coming back. I feed them year round, but I don't hang my birdhouses out until the first melt. And then after that, then they're up until September, October, till I know that all the babies are gone. The cavity dwellers like to have their houses cleaned out every year so that they can start a new nest. What we're going to do today is we're going to do some chip carving on here. I don't flatten the bottoms on these because I want the shell intact. It keeps the water from damaging the gourd and drying it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this the way it is. We're going to put drain holes on the bottom, vent holes on the top, and then we're going to drill 1 hole through the neck to hang it with. Heat from the top, water from the bottom, or any waste will come out, and it really does not deteriorate the bottom of the gourd much at all. You'd be surprised how well these things will hold up. Now this most popular size for Michigan is 1.25 inch hole. It is the most popular for bluebirds, wrens, and your finches. Now your little wrens will take the 1-inch holes just fine. The smaller birds, basically a 4x4 space, just like this, just a tiny little house is all these little wrens need with a 1-inch hole. The larger birds will need a larger gourd. I have some large gourds at home that are about this tall that I have a 2-inch hole in for small owls. I've never got an owl, but once in a while I have a pair of finches that think that that is the Taj Mahal, and they put this much stick in there and then stuff twigs in the hole to reduce the size of it down so they could just get in and out. I don't know, I think they're just insane, but they spend all summer filling this thing up just to have 1 nesting. And then I have to clean it all out. I feel guilty because I took all their work away. But anyway, we're going to show you how to get started on this. I picked my center spot somewhere above halfway. I'm going to put my hole in there. We're going to shrink this down a little bit. And I'm going to do a sunburst pattern on here to start with. Now I've chosen a fairly narrow gouge, so I'm just going to set this on here and we're just going to open this up just enough to make this an extra width of that piece. So you just match it up. You can measure it all out if you want. And this is going to give you the start spot for your chip carving. And we're going to make concentric circles out from here. We never put a perch on a birdhouse for a cavity dweller. And I have seen people make them and stick dowels on them, and I just look at them going, it's wrong. Perches are for predators. The birds who live in a cavity dwellers, they jump into the hole, they grab the edge of it, they jump down inside, they jump back up on the edge, and then they take off. They do not need, or won't use the perches because that's not what they're about. That's why they have to have the hole so far up, because they need to jump in and out so the babies don't get out until they're big enough to go. Now, how much you do on one of these would be determined by how large a gourd you got and how much pattern you want to put on it. And we'll do one more here. Okay, so now I'm going to lay, this is my helping hands. This is basically a tool that is normally used for circuit board soldering. It had a pair of alligator clips on it. I modified it to make it as a marking tool for my gourds. It draws a nice flat line. You can lock it in. So I'm going to put it to the center of this, and I'm going to come around here. Because this pattern can be done either horizontal or vertical. Further down. The lines don't have to be terribly accurate as far as distance apart. It's just a guide that we're going to use. You need at least 3 rings or layers of the pattern for this to work so that it looks correct. And I like to work in odd numbers like with floral arrangements. So if we can do 5 to 7 lines, that's a nice pattern. It'll show up really well. You can do this in 2 sections. You can do this on the natural gourd, do your carving, and then dye it. Wherever the carving's at, all the dye will turn really dark in the cut areas because the meat of the gourd is very porous and it'll soak it in. Or you can dye the gourd first and then chip carve it, and then all the carving areas will be very light in color. Or you can do a combination of both. So if you wanted to do the sunburst first, dye it, and then do the band second, so you would have the darker and lighter contrast to it. It would be entirely up to you on how you want to do that. So let's see what else we're going to do. Take this out. We're going to do we're going to divide our circle up so that we can know our sections here. It's like so. So we have all of our little sections so we can make our division areas. Then we're going to put our glove on because we have to be safety. And the gouges are very sharp. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in on the very first ring. Right on, we can start on the inside of this ring. There's no worry about going inside any too far because we've got plenty of room here for our hole for the birdhouse. So what we're going to do, all in one direction, we're going to lay this gouge on the lines, push it in, just wiggle it back and forth, and make a stop cut. All the way around on each one of these. It's easier if you make the stop cuts all first. And then we'll gouge up to them.
You're making those stop cuts on each 45?
Yep. Okay, I got to do it down here because I can't. That's the only way I can hold on to it. Now you're going to take the gouge and you're going to slide it in and work it up to the stop cut, so to the back of the smile, basically. And it's just a little wiggle. There is a book out by Lynn Rhyme. Her father did a lot of these birdhouses, and his work is exceptionally well done. He was a mathematician and laid these out in very precise detail, so it was exceptionally done. And I learned from his daughter how to do this, and she now has a book out with his work and hers in it. And it is called Chip Carved Birdhouses. And there's some beautiful pattern work in there. So if you get into this and you want to do some decorative birdhouses, they're great gifts. They last a long time. And now we've got the first row done. So that's what we start the first row. Now we're going to go the next row out, and we're going to turn it over, and we're going to make the smiles, the stop cuts, go in the opposite direction as the first row. So if they went this way this time, we're going to flip it over and do them this way, right next to them. You almost want the tips of each one of the cuts to touch. We'll go back around our circle.
What number gouge are you using, Karen? Do you know? What size?
I don't know. This is a 1/4 inch flex cut. I don't know the sweep on it, to tell you the truth. I don't. I've got a bag of them. It's not that deep, that's for sure. It's not a real deep gouge. Okay, now we've got our stop cuts in, and we're going to go chip up to them, go in the opposite direction. So if we went this way this time, we're going to go this way. And after we get the third pattern done, you'll be able to see the snake wiggles that are going to come out of this as we do this. It's a really pretty pattern, and the starburst that we're making will show off really nice. So if you're out and about and you see a birdhouse and you want one for your house and it has a perch on it, just cut it off. The birds don't need it. Okay, now we got that row done. Now we're going to go back the same way we did the first row and put that on the next row. And you can lengthen the width or the narrowness of these chips. So if you want to start out really close together and make them gradually widen out as you go, or you can keep them very narrow, it's up to you. You don't have, and once we get out to this outer edge, if you want, you can make the north, south, east, and west, the 1/4 ones, come out even longer, so that it makes the rays radiate out just a little bit further than the bulk of the centerpiece, just to give it some more detail. We also don't want to dye the gourds too dark. If the gourd is really dark and there's nothing light around it, like this chip carving, it makes it extremely difficult for the birds to be able to see the hole coming in at dusk. And that's why when we make the martin houses that you'll see hanging in clusters, they do them in white, because the birds need to see that black hole to be able to fly into it. And that's why they're painted white every year. And they're very fussy on their hole size on those too. It's the diameter of a 1/4. And they'll, at competition, they actually take a 1/4 and check to see if it's exactly rubbing on the rim, because it has to be that size or the birds won't use it. Most other birds, some of the other cavity dwellers, aren't nearly as fussy.
You don't have trouble with squirrels taking over?
Yeah, they don't live in a cavity. They're nest in a tree. What I have problems with is the wasps getting in them.
Yeah.
You have wasps get in and try to get into them before the birds do. And I go out at night and then spray inside the houses and just shoot the inside the top of the house. They usually try to nest up in here, to try to put a wasp nest up in here. So I just shoot a little bit of spray up in there at night to get rid of them if they're trying to move in on me. All right, well, we're going to put the next row of chips in. And I know there are people out there who make birdhouses out of gourds, and they'll tell you, oh, you don't have to clean them out, the birds will do it. That's bull. That's just a lazy gourd artist. Of course, I had my nephew do them when he was working for me, so, make the kid do them because he's got really long fingers that get in there and pull that stuff out. Okay, now you can see that this is starting to come. We're starting to get the wiggles back and forth. As the lines continue out, the pattern will grow, and you'll see that they're going to meld better and make the pattern work. So we're going to flip this carving back to the side. Put our stop cuts in again. It takes 6 months for a year once it's harvested in the fall for a gourd to dry out. What you're looking for is a fairly sturdy, solid gourd. When you're looking to buy a dry gourd, knock on it. The deeper and more solid the tone, the heftier the gourd is going to be. Bottle gourds are, this is a bottle. These are really pretty much a good standard gourd for a good birdhouse. Kettles, which look like a Hershey's Kiss, are also another good one that you can use. I find that they have a good wall on them. Other gourds, like your ornamentals and things, can have a really thin wall on them. Now, cannonball, which is just a little round gourd, can get pretty good size. They can get 4 to 6 inches around. Now, if you want to put an eye hook in there, put just one little hole in it, and put some drain holes in it, make it a finch house, that'd be perfectly fine. As long as they've got a 4 by 4 inch cubed space so they can get in, because they've also got to be able to stretch their wings while they're in there. Yep. So yeah, all different kinds of gourds can be used, but the sturdier ones are going to hold up a little bit better and last a little bit longer. Yeah, when the gourd's dry, when you buy them when they're green, they have a skin on them. It's a pale color, usually a light green. Some of them are speckled, but the pale green ones are usually the hard shells. That skin molds off and it has to be cleaned. So in order to clean that, what I do is I grab a bunch of old towels and I soak them down in water. I wrap each gourd up in an old towel, throw it in a black garbage bag and lay it out in the sun for a couple days. And this steam cleans it. It basically softens all this moldy, nasty old skin in here, because you do not want to sand these when they're dirty. When the skin is dry, it is full of molds and bacteria and spores, and the last thing you want to do is sand this and then breathe it in. These are not a healthy hobby. These things can hurt you if you breathe enough dust in for a long enough period. There's a disease called gourd flu, and it affects your upper respiratory, and it can kill people because they may have an allergic reaction to it or an asthmatic reaction to the dust. So yeah, gourds are something that you want to respect with washing them in water, keeping the process wet, and after a couple days, that should come off like mud with a plastic pot scrubber. Just clean them right off and rinse them, and then just lay them up on the deck in the sun. 24 hours later, they're dry. They can be stored in a trash can. I actually put a bounce sheet in the bottom to keep the mice and stuff out of the containers, because they'll chew through the plastic. The metal ones, they can rust out, but I don't seem to have any issue with mice getting into them, and they don't really bother the true heavy gourds, the harder shelled ones, because it's too much work to chew through when there's thin shelled ones out there that they can go bah, bah, in 2 minutes they're in. I know a gentleman who had problems with drying gourds in his barn because of the mice, and they were chewing holes in his gourds all the time. So he decided to put the mice to work for him. He drilled all the holes for the birdhouses in the green gourds, and then threw them up in the loft in his garage, in his barn, to let them dry out. The mice could go in and out, cleaned all the seeds and pulp out for him. So there you go. I said, but now you've got a huge mouse population because of all the seeds they've been eating all winter. Okay, now we're ready to chip again. Usually always use a curved gouge on a curved surface. If you want to stick a gouge in your hand, do it a flat blade on here. It's wicked. It slides. Everything slides off of here. So with this, you can get a little start and go into it before you hurt yourself. And I've stuck a gouge in my hand. I've stuck it in my thigh. I have little smiley scars. Well, that's what they are. They got their little curved scars, their little scars. Some gourds are tougher than others to do this on. You really can't tell until you get into them how the shells, how thick and sturdy this is going to be and how hard it is to cut. Some gourds are very tough to chip carve. It just depends on where it was grown and how it was dried.
You normally put the entrance hole in before you start this?
No.
Work that you're doing, you do this first?
Yeah, always do because you have to have the center spot here to put your compass on.
Okay.
I do all my chip carving. I do everything. I clean the thing out even before I put this hole in. Because once I get the hole in, then all I'm left to do is clean it out and hang it up. Because I can even run the string through here once it's got the hole drilled in it, because it's just such a short neck, you can go right through it. I've got longer drill bits for bigger gourds that I can drill straight through, but these little guys I love just going right straight through the neck. It gives you a nice plot to hang them from, and it just works out really well for them. This way.
Do you ever carve one green?
No. There are a few techniques that you can do. When the gourd is green, there is a technique from Hawaii, which is called, it's a coffee dyeing process, where you will take the green gourd, you're going to cut off the top of it at about here, and you're going to pull the pulp and seed out, the bulk of it, and then you're going to take your knives or your gouges and gently cut through the skin in a pattern of your choice. And then the gourd is filled with day-old coffee, and it's kept filled over the course of the fall into winter. Usually I do them outside, and then I just bring the leftover coffee and just fill the gourd up. It dyes from the inside out, and it's the opposite of what you'd think. The pattern stays light, and the skin pulls the coffee through it. So basically the gourd is all dyed when it's done, and you just wash the skin off, and it's already done.
And that's done with a green?
Oh, the green gourd, yeah. You can,
It's dry.
yep, and it's a coffee dyeing process. You could use other types of dye in it, but coffee's relatively inexpensive since we all have usually a little bit left in the pot at the bottom of the pot. And that's what you want, is the heavier dye. You can also use teas and other organic.
Berry juice.
Yep. You can use other types of products. The process is just why the gourd is going through the drying process, and you need to keep it filled with the coffee. So yeah, it's a cool process to work on. I don't work on green gourds. You can green clean a gourd by taking a dull knife like a butter knife or a table knife and scraping the skin off. And it will leach water as soon as you start. And it'll be damp and it gets slippery and hard to hang on to, so wear a glove. But once you do get all the skin off, you wipe it down with a Clorox bleach wipe, and then I lay them on stacks of newspapers, like a Sunday section. And what happens is the water leaches out of the gourd so fast that they'll dry in 3 months. And they'll almost be this manila color when they're done. Because you keep wiping it with Clorox bleach, it prevents this mold from reforming on here, and it keeps the gourd skin very light. All this patterning you see on here in this discoloration is from the drying process of the skin. So if you want something this light, then you green clean it. They're beautiful, and we save them primarily for wood burning because we have such a dark shell to work from, so we want it as light as possible. So now I'm going to leave these pattern here, and I'm going to bring out the north, south, east, and west so that it radiates out so that it's longer than the rest. So we can break the pattern up just a bit. That. You're missing one. Let's do one more. Yep. How'd you end up that way? Yep. one backwards. I don't know how I did that. Okay. And there we go. Now we've got our rays coming out. There you can see that they're starting to separate out. Okay, when we do the vertical band, what we're going to do is we're going to start off, we're just going to draw lines. Normally I would have a T-square against the edge of the table, so I've got it vertical. And then once every inch or so, I'm going to mark lines like this. Or you use your finger to mark off the width. And again, you're just going to do the same thing, only this time we're going to go this way around, and you're going to go first row all in one direction. And then we're going to flip these back. I'm going to put the stop cuts in on these real quick. You can use different size gouges to do this as well. You can start out with a very small gouge in here and work out to wider depths as your widths as you're going out. It all depends on what kind of tools you got and what you want to play with, because this is basically just the circles or the lines. You can do them in diamonds and just fill them in as you go. It depends on what look you're after with what you want to gouge on these. With the drills, I use a 3 to 5 millimeter on the drain holes. I like brad point drill bits. They have a point on the end, and they. Now we've got our drain holes in. I always make them smaller than the vent holes. And now with this, because we're going to go through the neck, we want to go through across from where we're at with the pattern. Then I'll go in here on the top. Just put a couple of little vent holes on the top. So that's pretty much what we're going to do with our birdhouses.